More about Armed Forces Day. I'm now joined on the line by Defence Analyst Helmoed-Römer Heitman. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the line, Mr. Heitman.
My pleasure.
All right, so let's start by assessing our armed forces. Just how good are they, especially when we compare them to other developing nations?
Pretty good. Look, there are capability gaps. For instance, virtually no transport aircraft, no maritime patrol aircraft. But the equipment overall not bad, so the money for maintaining it is lacking. But the key factor, which is the people, pretty damn good. They did exceedingly well in Bangui, as you may recall, in 2013. They've done very well operating with MONUSCO in the Congo. And three separate military commanders of MONUSCO and Monaco Fort have said the only contingent in the Congo with which they go into a serious fight was the South African battalion. And they did pretty well in Burundi before that and in Darfur. They are pretty good. That's really they are. The big problem is that there isn't enough money to train properly, to maintain equipment properly, or to replace old equipment or close gaps. And there the disconnect is between what government expects the Defence Force to do and what is prepared to pay for it.
All right, so a great reputation enjoyed in countries beyond our borders in their deployments. What about back at home? What does the Army get up to when they're not on the field beyond our borders?
Well, mainly the Border Patrol as an action. The Army itself does the Border Patrols with some support from the Air Force. The Navy does some coastal patrols, also does the Mozambique Channel, which is the route that most of our imported oil follows, and also the route that most of our trade with the Mediterranean, Persian Gulf, or Western India, Western Asia goes through, and is potentially extremely vulnerable to piracy. And now that you've got Islamist terrorist activity in northern Mozambique, the risk of maritime terrorism, as you've seen in the Persian Gulf area, is also possible there, hence the patrols. Air Force does some monitoring of the airspace. They try to help with maritime patrols, but they're using 1943 vintage Dakotas for that without a proper radar or anything else. So that's a bit limited. And the rest of the time they train.
All right.
As and when money allows the training. And that's a bit of a shortage.
All right, so you've mentioned money a few times, and this is something that's been cited for quite a while now by at least a couple of defence ministers. What is the danger to South Africa if the armed forces don't get the kind of budgets that they need?
Look, the primary danger at this stage is that the government would commit an element of the Defence Force to some operation, a peace enforcement operation or crisis response operation in Africa, where they would bump into better equipped, better armed forces than themselves. We already had the situation where in Bangui, the troops only had Land Cruisers and Geckos, no armored vehicles, whereas the rebels, the Seleka rebels, had heavy machine guns, recoilless rifles, automatic grenade launchers, etc., and had a distinct firepower edge. In Darfur, the same thing happened. The troops had, admittedly there, they had Mamba armored personnel carriers, but the weapons that the rebel forces had on the technicals could penetrate the armor of the Mamba at 1,000 meters or more. So the problem there is, that's the real risk. Sending forces into an area that they really, where they bump into something they can't deal with. The lack of transport aircraft also means we can't deploy a strong force quickly, or reinforce it quickly, or extract it quickly. In the maritime sphere, the risk is we really can't monitor our waters. So we don't really know who is fishing where they shouldn't be fishing, who is smuggling stuff ashore where they shouldn't be smuggling stuff ashore. We don't have a clue because we simply don't have the aircraft to carry out proper maritime surveillance. Ditto with the airspace. There's not adequate radar coverage, so anybody can really fly in and out of South Africa. If you fly low enough, land on a farm strip and unload or load anything you like. Who's to know?
All right, so the way you're talking, it sounds as if we should be quite concerned. Perhaps there's no real danger of it happening, but if we were attacked by a foreign army, we may not be able to put up the best defense.
Look, at the moment there is no neighbor really that can threaten South Africa. They were much smaller. If the Defence Force loses its remaining conventional capabilities, then countries like Botswana that are building up their forces, like Zimbabwe with the force it used to have before it fell apart, although they've got very professional people, just no spare parts, they could theoretically then present a real threat. They'd be too small to occupy South Africa, but they could do to us what, say, Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi did to the DRC, and basically defang the place and destabilize it. More and more risky is if we see a new Cold War emerging, which it looks like, with major power competition, that one or more major powers will start either putting proxy forces into Africa, as the Soviets did, or as both the Soviets and Americans did, and start supplying heavy equipment to another country that might not be friendly to us. That might not be a neighbor of ours. It might be a country that threatens one of our neighbors, or fellow SABC states. And we are then supposed to go in support. With what? So I don't really see an invasion of South Africa or an attack on South Africa. But our ability to deter military adventurism in the region by, say, another African power armed by somebody else or by proxy forces is exceedingly limited and diminishing by the day.
All right, and then you did mention training. Is that something that's playing out in the way that we do our soldiering, or are we still a highly trained armed forces?
The elements that deploy are very well trained. The rest of the training is somewhat lacking. There isn't enough ammunition, there isn't enough fuel. Our pilots don't fly nearly enough, the ships don't spend enough time at sea. From a larger operational point of view, I don't think the Army's conducted a full-scale brigade exercise in 20 years. There are probably only one or two officers left in the Army who know how to actually move a full brigade from one place to another place. With moving a couple of thousand vehicles, it's not just a couple of thousand drivers getting in, putting their foot on the gas and pulling away. But the troops that deploy to the Congo now, and we've only got the one mission at the moment, there the Army does go to great pains to make sure they're well trained. And they've got people who have been in the Congo before, they've got officers and NCOs who were at Bangui to oversee the training, to keep upgrading the training standard and the level, and did oversee the helicopter crews who go up there. So we are careful that we don't deploy people who aren't well enough trained.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks very much indeed for your insights today. That was Defence Analyst Helmoed-Römer Heitman, who was basically saying that our troops are doing pretty well under the circumstances, faced with enormous challenges of equipment, funds for training, but certainly those on the front line have equipped themselves well and are doing pretty good jobs in the countries beyond our borders. Palisa?